Investigative report writing. Now, let's discuss about the final part of the investigation, reducing your investigation to a report. In this chapter, we would discuss the general principles and best practices to be kept in mind while preparing a report, how the reports should be structured, various parts of the report, like the title page, executive summary, main report, summary of allegations, details of investigation. We would also discuss how to document the evidence and interview, assess credibility of the witnesses. We would also learn how to capture investigation limitations and draw a conclusion. Should we be recommending a punishment? Why review of report is necessary, and so on. Let's admit, writing an investigative report is the most tedious task of an investigation. While investigation is fun, as the investigators are unearthing facts which a naked eye could not see, reducing the investigation findings in form of a report becomes tedious. For this, the investigator needs to sequence the events, use precise and concise language. Use of even one wrong word may change the flavor of the investigation findings. Be mindful of the flow, and also to keep in mind that there are different expectations from the investigation and reports. Because the report is the most important part of the investigation, the investigator can't skip this critical investigation step. Your investigative report reflects on you and your investigation, so make sure it's as clear, comprehensive, accurate, and polished as possible. Remember, an investigation is as good as its report, as this is how an investigator reflects their work. While the report should be written in a manner so even a person without any knowledge about the event should understand it, its review by a second pair of eyes should ensure it has all the answers to probable questions on the investigation. While writing an investigative report, its purpose has to be kept in mind. It should also be kept in mind that it can initiate action based on the findings the report presents. The action could be initiation of a corrective action, implementation of training, counseling, or even termination of employment. The report is a record of the steps of the investigation. It can be used to prove that the investigation was timely, complete, unbiased, and fair. The report may be cited in any legal action. So, it's important that the report is detailed and accurate, but on the other hand, does not include unnecessary detail that can get the company into trouble. General principles and best practices while preparing a report. As a rule, while preparing a report, it should be ensured by the investigator that nothing should be mentioned in the report which is not supported by any written or documentary evidence. All written reports to be subject to independent review within the investigations team before issue. The second pair of eyes principle is attracted here. An independent review would help in establishing understanding of the report. It is essential to maintain the confidential nature of the reports, and investigators should be aware of the need to comply with legal obligations where appropriate. This means the sharing of the report should be need-based, and no unnecessary judgment should be reflected. The tone of reports should always be objective and independent. The report must be organized in a way that anybody internally or externally can understand it without having to refer other materials. Report must document the investigative findings objectively and accurately, and provide decision makers with enough information to determine what further action needs to be taken. Finally, the report must indicate whether the allegations were substantiated, unsubstantiated, or whether there were some investigation limitations. Also, if there are some systemic issues identified, they should be captured separately. It is advisable to use simple words while writing a report. Avoid professional jargon, as your team may be familiar with it, however the larger audience may not be familiar with the jargon. Here are some suggested words, which may be used while avoiding the strenuous words. These words will improve your report quality and present a report in a professional manner. You may take time to read the words, and for that you may pause the video. Structure of report. Different stakeholders or readers would have different expectations from the report. That is, the executives will probably want to know the main areas of concern, significant events. Similarly, the business stakeholders may only want to know the main areas of concern, significant events, rather than a full investigation report containing the finer details. Legal department may require a detailed investigation report, including a chronology of events, in order to provide advice and/or prepare a defense. Management HR may be looking to use the report for a disciplinary process and could therefore require more detail. Nevertheless, following is generally accepted as a good report structure. Begin with the title page, containing title, your name, submission date. The table of contents must always be present in a longer report. Follow it with the executive summary. This portion is the summary of the entire report. It is an art, preparing a good executive summary, as the investigators have to summarize all important aspects of a lengthy investigation into a few sentences. The main report must have the three main parts: introduction, terms of reference and the outline of the report, that is, how the matter was reported, by whom, what are the main allegations, what additional allegations identified, etc. Body of the report, this contains headings and subheading to highlight importance. Here the flow matters. Depending on the case, the flow may be event-wise or allegation-wise. Conclusion, this part deals with the inference to be drawn and provides the overview of the solution. The title page. Apart from the investigation number or title, this page should also contain date of report, when it is being issued, investigator's name, name of the supervisor, or the person who reviewed, issued the report. If they are different, it should also mention the names of the executives or staff to whom the report is addressed. Please see the slide, report circulation, for more details. Other details which can be added here are the date the complaint was received, how the complaint was received, for example, employee hotline, email to HR manager, verbal report to supervisor. The date that the case was assigned. This page could also mention the details of the complainant, if available, for instance, complainant's name, complainant's identification. Note: for whistleblower allegations, we need to avoid identifying the whistleblower. In most jurisdictions, it is prohibited by law too. Next part is executive summary. The executives of the organization have limited time. Hence, the executive summary should explain in a few sentences the entire issue with conclusion. To be more precise, the executive summary should be a concise overview of the investigation, from beginning to the end. Remember, many readers will never need to go beyond this section. High-level stakeholders should get an overall picture of the allegations, investigation, and the outcome through executive summary. No evidence needs to be discussed here. With our own experience, we can say that the popularity of the investigator or investigations team surely increases with how best they are able to squeeze the entire investigation into executive summary. As a thumb rule, limit the executive summary max to a page, if not half page. While everyone has their own way of writing a report or creating a brief, we are presenting an example of executive summary. We are now reading an example of executive summary. You can pause the video anytime to know or read, as this is important to understand the nitty-gritties. On January 23, 2021, the Human Resources Manager received a written complaint about an internal employee wrongdoing, submitted by ABC. ABC claimed that on January 22, 2021, XYZ, in order to. Here, you should refer the allegations, verbatim, or in your own words. The case was handed over to, mention investigator's name and designation for investigation. During the investigation, here, mention the investigative steps, which would be CCTV review, access review, mail review, system review, etc. On the available evidence, witnesses A, B, C, etc. were interviewed, who supported the evidence or denied, or explained the reasons for violation. On February 25, 2021, XYZ was interviewed, who bases the available evidence, accepted the violation, or accepted the violation and explained, or denied any violation, however had no explanation for the available evidence. Bases the available evidence, allegation numbers 1, 2, 3 are substantiated. Note: there is no recommendation of any punishment here. As per good practices, the punishment should be decided by an independent committee. As per the natural principles of justice too, the executive and judiciary should be separate, to have an independent decision. Many organizations compel the investigators to recommend punishments. This should be left on HR. A good scenario would be that while discussing the case with the HR or independent disciplinary committee, investigators can cite past such references if available. However, investigators should still avoid recommending punishments. They can, however, opine, basis their interactions with the subjects or witnesses, how convinced they were with the subjects or witnesses' answers. Now we move to the main report part. The main report should have following minimum parts. Summary of allegations, details of investigation, investigation limitations, conclusion. Summary of allegations. In this part, describe the allegation in simple and clear language. Avoid using jargon, acronyms, or technical terms that the average reader outside the group may not understand. This part should also mention what type of case is it. For example, is it a case of alleged harassment, discrimination, fraud, or other workplace misconduct? Specify the case type. For example, is it sexual harassment, gender discrimination, accounts payable fraud, etc.? Who is the alleged victim, or staff, or client involved? If the alleged victim is an employee, identify the person's supervisor. Capture details of the allegation as initial information received. Also mention the loss or damage assessed at the time of allegation, if any. Let's discuss an example of the main report. It was informed to the investigator or investigations team that XYZ, an accounts clerk, has been siphoning off payments to a dummy supplier who has been created by him in the company's procurement system. It is further alleged that a discrepancy was noticed by the invoicing team when one of the suppliers questioned a payment, and during its review, the above violation was noticed. Here, we can also add the allegations which revealed during the investigation, if any. For example, during investigation, following violations were also noticed, which were added to the allegations for this investigation. The payments to the suppliers are rounded off by XYZ towards the upper side, however the excess payment is not credited to the company's account. The objective of this investigation was to determine if the allegations were factual or not, and if there are any further such violations in the past, by XYZ. The next part would be details of investigation. This section contains a full account of the investigative steps, from beginning to the end. Again, it's important to use simple, clear language, free of jargon and technical terms. It is important to keep the scope of the investigation focused on the allegation. The following three parts would form the details in the investigation report. Discussion of evidence, both documentary and oral. Documenting the interviews, and also assessing credibility of the witnesses interviewed. Discussion of evidence. Record a description of each action taken during the investigation. This becomes a diary of your investigation, showing everything that was done during the investigation. It also records who did it and when. Be thorough and detailed because this section of your report can be an invaluable resource if you are ever challenged on any details of your investigation. Mention here the type of action completed, such as documents collection and review, meeting, contacting parties, conducting an interview, following up, etc. Also mention about the person responsible for the action, date the action was completed, brief description of the action. This portion of the report should also mention what the outcome of each action was. For instance, review of document revealed that basis discussion with witness, it was revealed ABC during their interview stated that, however when document or evidence was shown to them, they stated so and so. Documenting evidence. It's critically important to include and fully consider all evidence obtained, whether or not it supports your case. In this section, describe all the evidence obtained. This could include video footage, email records, employee security access records, computer login records, documents or papers, physical objects, etc. Number the evidence and refer to any physical evidence by the number recorded on the chain of evidence document. Remember, the investigation should not only be unbiased, but it should also project as being unbiased. Ignoring evidence that doesn't support the allegation will draw flawed conclusion, would also undermine your investigative abilities and your credibility as an investigator. As long as you have a good explanation of why certain evidence is not being weighted as heavily as other evidence, your conclusion is defensible. The list of evidence should form part of the investigation report and should be attached as appendixes, so that it is a permanent record, attached with the report, and also helps the reader to refer the evidence to make their decision. Let's now talk about documenting the interviews. For this, write a summary of each interview. These should be brief summaries, listed separately for each interview. Include the following information: who conducted the interview, who was interviewed, where the interview took place, date of the interview, what was revealed. Include a list of people who refused to be interviewed or could not be interviewed, with the reason for the same. Also, for people who were interviewed, but refused to answer certain questions, these questions should also be listed out in their interviews. While the example of the interview is discussed in the separate chapter named Interview, here is the example, how the interview details should be documented in the report. Read on. James Jacob was interviewed on June 13, 2021, by investigator or interviewer's name, at, state, location of interview. James was asked about the events of April 23, 2021, and he stated so and so. James was further questioned about so and so, and he stated so and so. James was shown, mention document details or statement of another witness, which contradicted his above statement, to which James replied, mention his reply here. There could be some reports, which may require the interviews to be added at the discussion of evidence stage, and may not find place separately. In these circumstances, following example may help the investigators. During review of the state evidence, it revealed that, mention what it revealed. However, when the said evidence was shown to witness or subject, they revealed so and so. In light of the above discussion, the allegation so and so is substantiated or partly substantiated or unsubstantiated. Assessing credibility of the evidence is also important, as it gives the report readers the details, how the evidence should be read. There may be contrary views on expressing an opinion by the investigator in their investigation reports. However, presenting an analysis of evidence or statement is not wrong. Hence, it is well accepted that aside from collecting the evidence, it is also an investigator's job to analyze the evidence and allow the readers to come to a conclusion. Therefore, there should be a credibility assessment for each interview subject in the interview report. Describe your reasons for determining that the interviewee is or isn't a credible source of information. This will help the readers of the report to conclude the right action to be taken on the report. As the interviewer has observed the behavior of the interviewee, their observation on the following should be included in the report. Plausibility. Is the testimony believable and does it make sense? Demeanor. Did the person seem to be telling the truth? Motive to falsify. Does the person have a reason to lie? Corroboration. Is there testimony or evidence that corroborates the witness account? Past record. Does the subject have a history of similar behavior? For example, I consider James to be a credible witness, based on the corroboration of his story with Jane and also, because he has nothing to gain by reporting these incidents. He has no prior relationship with the subject and seemed genuinely upset by his behavior. OR. During interview with James, his replies were found contradictory, especially replies to questions so and so, and so and so. While he stated that as per his opinion, Jane was not a good manager, however, he could not produce any reasons for the same, or the reasons provided by him were more of his own opinion, reflecting him being uncomfortable with his manager. Investigation limitations. If you think that you can find evidence for each allegation or action, you are fooling yourself. There would be certain questions within each investigation which would have no answers. This could be due to systemic limitations or age of incident, or due to some witnesses who forget or chose to forget about the incidents, maybe due to their proximity with the subjects, or for any other reason. If there are any such limitations in the investigation, they should be clearly mentioned in the reports. It shows that the investigator was aware about these limitations, they did their best to find a solution for these, however for reasons beyond their control, the evidence could not be collected. This will also help the decision makers in knowing the investigation limitations, and should the matter take a legal turn, the company lawyers would be prepared for that. This also helps the company seniors to devise a strategy to plug these gaps for any future such actions, should the systemic gaps be identified and are highlighted. Here's an example of the investigation's limitations. Storage of CCTV, access logs, system logs for a shorter duration or no storage at all. Highlighting these would make the risk managers think if any action needs to be taken to plug this gap. Lacks records keeping, which could be mandated by the regulators, however, is not strictly followed by the company record keepers. This could be calling for a regulatory action, but the management may be unaware about this. No clear process or procedure for a particular work, for which, although the subject cannot be taken to task, but the company should brainstorm, should this be corrected. The report, therefore, should have a separate section for investigation limitations, which should clearly bring out the gaps, for the company risk officers, or other seniors, to take action and close them. Reaching a conclusion. The conclusion of the report is the trickiest part of the report. The conclusion of the report is not only used to summarize the report, but also suggests the solution of the problem, where it being addressed and discussed. So, analyze the entire report again, find the issue behind the violation, if any, or why the allegation could have been raised and report here, if the available evidence suggests substantiation of allegation or otherwise. Use this section to set out your findings and conclusion at the end of the investigation. This is where your analysis comes into play. Keep the points in logical order, addressing the issue being examined, and don't include any information that is not supported by the fact. For the sake of repeating, we must add, nothing should be mentioned in the report, which is not supported by evidence, either documentary or in the form of a statement. The report must be able to show that the conclusions are based on reliable evidence that is relevant, and that the investigator has also considered evidence that doesn't support the conclusion. Here's an example of conclusion. The investigation findings, based on the evidence, indicate that allegation regarding favoritism in promotion is substantiated. There is also evidence to suggest that there are inconsistent rewards and incentives within the team. However, there is no evidence to suggest that there are any biases towards the female staff, or the female staff have been subjected to any harassment. Or the evidence collected during investigation indicates no merits in any of the allegations raised against XYZ. The available evidence in form of statements of 1, 2, and 3 indicates that XYZ is a strong manager, always pushing his team to perform well. However, a few of his direct reports are not comfortable with his pushy language. Should the investigators be recommending the action or punishment against the subject? In our opinion, this portion should be avoided in the report, for the reasons stated above, except if the recommendation is for a system enhancement. Strictly speaking, the recommendation of action on the violation spelled out in the report is a task for the employee relation or HR team, and the investigation report should only be speaking about the gravity of the violation. If the conclusion portion of the report is worded properly and presents a clear picture about the violation, there are less chances that the seniors would insist on any recommendation for punishment. Even in law enforcement cases, as there is a separation between the executives from judiciary, the recommendation of punishment should not be expected from the investigators, who act as executive. Moreover, the decision of punishment should be left on a disciplinary committee, instead of one person taking a decision to rule out any future allegations of bias. However, if this is insisted by the organization seniors, the recommendation could mention past actions taken in similar cases. Review of the report. This is as important as writing the report. Make it a thumb rule to get your investigation report reviewed, or at least read by the investigation manager or any peer investigator, for their understanding of the report. It must be kept in mind that the report would be seen by your supervisors, directors, as well as may be seen by law enforcement, attorneys and judges if a case goes to court. Apart from this, let's be honest, you, being an investigator, would have in-depth knowledge about some systems, processes, procedures or regulations, while the reader of the report may not have that. The report might have missed clarifying these, considering common knowledge by the investigator. Also, there could be a chance that the investigator may have shaky grammar, their spellings leave something to be desired, and punctuation is less than perfect. Hence, the review of a report by a second pair of eyes is a must. Many organizations insist on a peer review of each report, which benefits both the reviewer and reviewee. While certainly the reviewee is benefiting as the report in hand is being corrected, the reviewer can learn different styles of collecting evidence or investigations. Their knowledge about the issues being investigated also improves and they are ready for the next such case. And always remember to run a spell check before you pass on any document to others. Also, a consistent grammar throughout would showcase your professionalism. Report circulation. Circulation criteria should be assessed on a case-by-case basis. Most of the organizations have their report circulation criteria. In case there is none, it should be well defined by the investigations manager, along with the head of HR and head of legal. This is a must, as the investigation reports would either lead to a disciplinary action, which is within the preview of HR, or a legal action, wherein legal team would be involved later. There could be regulatory violations found during the investigation also, hence a sign-off from head of compliance may also be required. The investigation reports should always be on need-to-know basis and any unnecessary release may result in compromise of confidentiality or reputation of the subject. This may invite an adverse action on the organization, hence a decision involving the organization's control officers is always good. Now, here's the report circulation example. A policy violation case, the report should be addressed to the business manager for contemplated action against the subject or improvement of processes, business HR lead for initiating action against the subject in consultation with business manager, business compliance lead to assist should there be a regulatory reporting required, business legal lead should there be a legal action later on, business risk lead should some policies processes need review. And internal or external fraud reports should be marked to all of above, along with company's fraud manager. If the organization is a bank, the report should also be addressed to the vigilance or fraud reporting team, who will report the fraud to the regulator, as this would be necessary in some jurisdictions. A whistleblower allegation report should be marked to all, as mentioned in 1 above, and also to the ethics committee of the organization, should there be one. The identity of the complainant should never be even hinted in the whistleblower investigation report, as it is barred in most of the jurisdictions. Sexual harassment allegations, the investigation is done by the internal complaints committee and the report is restrictedly circulated within themselves only. Apart from the above, the report should be marked to the organization's disciplinary committee, should there be one, or the employee relation head, who would decide on the action, either in the disciplinary meeting or themselves. Listing the annexures. Your investigation report now complete. You may recall, we kept on reminding you about not writing anything, which is not backed by oral or documentary evidence. While you list out your evidence here, you may also provide a small description about the witness or document. In law enforcement case reports, there is a provision to provide a gist of evidence as well. You may consider this in your corporate investigation reports as well. A list of annexures may look like below. Take a pause to read on. Subjects details. This should be the last portion in the report, just above the list of annexures or appendixes. This should come last, due to confidentiality and for the HR to locate the employer and take necessary action. The details may include subject's employee code, subject's email address, employment level, hire date, location. Although the details would be provided by the HR team during investigation, but noting these details here shows professionalism and reduces the work for disciplinary committee. Now, here's a sample investigation report for your read. You may like to go through the same and pause at your will. With this, we come to an end of this chapter. Hope you learned something new today.